Check out this latest painting that I just finished. It's called A Fair Exchange. And today I am going to walk you through the process that I took to create this painting. Every other Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time, I host an art live stream called Art Autopsy, where I work on a brand new oil painting, and I encourage everybody watching at home to get your art supplies out and to make art alongside me. So if you tune in, again, every other Thursday at 7 p.m., you'll get to watch me create art and hopefully get to make some art for yourself. So this painting right here is the one that I completed most recently. I began with a basic black and white sketch done in acrylic, and this is just to get the vibe of what I want the piece to be, and eventually after I finish with this sketch stage I'll move into oil. But I start by layering in just a base color in the background to get rid of the white, and then I'm just taking some black and white acrylic and sketching this up. What you can't see is off camera I have a shelf with all kinds of different stuff. I've got masks and cloth and all kinds of different items that I can look over to for kind of a reference if I need to get a grip on what the light and shadow might look like. I don't have this specific image there as a reference, but just lots of stuff on my shelf so I can have many different things to pull from if I need an example of a light source or how the light might wrap around an object and what kind of shadows it might produce. So I went into this just wanting to do basically a simple portrait, but as you'll see as it progresses, it turned into much more than that. I didn't know exactly what this would become other than I want it to be a portrait, and I just started painting and let the paint kind of show me the way and tell me what it wanted to become. At this point, you'll see now I've moved on to color, and now I'm in the oil painting stage. So the acrylic part is just the sketch, that's done, and all of the acrylic paint is going to be covered by oil paint by the end of this. So that's just a guide so I can keep track of my original idea. But as you'll see, it's going to evolve and shift over time. So I started out using a thin coat of iron oxide red, which I then wiped off, and that gives me like a base coat for the skin color. And then I took a titanium white and blended that in. Since it's oil paint, it takes a while to dry, so you can put some colors down on your canvas with the oil and mix them on the fly as you go, because that's one of the beautiful things about working in oil is that slow dry time, which allows you to continue to work with your colors as you go. The acrylic dries so fast that there's virtually no time to do that. Of course, the more you work with it, acrylic kind of forces you to paint faster. You become fast while working with acrylic because of that quick dry time. But to me, the real fun comes in at this stage when you're working with oil and you really get to spend some time with the piece. So this first section right here, this is still part of the live stream. This particular live stream went on for about 2 hours, maybe just over 2 hours. And so I have a lot of people who tune in to watch the live streams. And for those people who make art during the live stream, I encourage them to email me a photo of the work that they've created during the live stream, and I share those on future live streams. So if you're an artist and you want to tune in for the live stream and you also want to have your work shared with my audience, tune in for the next one and then share with me what you create, and I will in turn share it with the rest of my audience. Here you'll see there's going to be a shift in video quality. It's going to get a little better, and there it goes right there. So that was the end of the live stream, and now I gave it a day or two, to let all that paint dry, and now I'm back on it, just continuing on with the image. In this next session, I just put some titanium white on my canvas and sketched up some rough ideas for where I wanted this to go. The figure was looking pretty miserable, and I wanted to give him a little friend to play around with, so I sketched in a squirrel for him to be hanging out with. and I thought it would be fun if the squirrel were lighting his cigarette in exchange for a peanut. So that's the direction I started to go with it. I gave him a third eye, and you'll see as I go, I keep having ideas for where I want this painting to go, and I'll rough it in. Maybe even work on it a little bit, add some detail, and then I'll change my mind about what I want it to be, and I'll just paint right over the top of it. That, to me, allowing myself to be that loose and fluid with the design is like one of the main joys of painting, right? You don't have to commit to what the painting is going to be until you decide to call the piece done. And in this case, you'll see that third eye is as an example of what I'm talking about right here. It's just kind of staring forward, where clearly his other two eyes are looking down at the squirrel. But I'm going to shift all of those to where they're all three looking at this exchange, looking at the cigarette being lit, and looking at the peanut in his hand, that kind of thing. So the direction of the eyes will shift as it goes and as it evens out. So moving on to the squirrel here, I'm actually using that same kind of tone that I used on his skin and on the robe for the squirrel. And you'll see it starts to feel a bit monochromatic, and the squirrel almost disappears into the wardrobe. So as I move forward, keeping that in mind, that I want the squirrel to pop a little bit, you'll see I'll be messing with the colors and with the shadows just to make him stand out a little bit. I wanted to add this string of Christmas lights going around the neck of the figure, just to give it these little pops of color and to be able to play with those different colors bouncing off of the squirrel and the wardrobe and the hands of the figure and all this stuff. So we're going to get to adding color to those lights in a second, but I just wanted to explain, if you were wondering what those shapes were. It will all make sense shortly. And here I go with the painting, adding in some color onto that so you can see. You'll notice in the sketch phase, where I was working out the fabric, I did some very bold highlights and shadows for the way the fabric would flow around him. As I progress and I begin to add more detail into the fabric, I'm actually going to kind of shift those shadows a bit. I'm not going to make them as harsh. I'm just going to let them kind of exist in the background beyond the pattern that I put in there. But I just wanted to point that out now so you can see how bold that shadow work is, and then look at it again by the end of the painting, and you'll see how subtle that actually becomes by the end of it. It's all just a process and a journey, you know, figuring out what the image is going to be and what you want all of these different elements to look like as you go. It's just a lot of fun, and I hope that comes through in the final piece, is just the fun that I had creating this. If you've been following my art for any period of time, you've probably noticed that I tend to add a lot of squirrels into the backdrop of my art. I love squirrels, I really do, and I even have a little picnic bench, a mini one outside in my backyard where we feed the local squirrels. They're a lot of fun. They're certainly little characters, and I love bringing them to life in my paintings. This is probably, oh man, I can't even guess how many squirrels I've painted at this point, but it's been a lot. They're always fun little characters to add in here. Yeah, as you'll see, the hand that I'm working on right now is just kind of floating up there in space, but that hand is going to end up holding a peanut that he's offering to the squirrel. They do love peanuts. And then let me bring your attention to all these weird shapes happening in the background on this painting. I had the idea that this particular scene would be set in kind of a foggy cemetery at night. And so I put those shapes back there just to remind myself, okay, this is going to be a cemetery. Those are just the super rough shapes of graves and trees. To remind myself that that's where I was going with it, because I knew that it was going to be a long time between the time when I started sketching in these additional elements and the time I actually got to the background. I didn't want to forget that that was my intention. So I do that a lot. I'll just throw in some basic shapes just as a reminder to myself that these are things that I want to be incorporated into this piece. Let me also point out here, look how muted the color is on the lights. Those lights, you'll see me go over and over them again. I use a thin layer of paint with each pass, and it's a technique called glazing. You mix your paint with a medium. In this case, I use liquid. And with every layer that I put on it, those colors get more and more bold. And you see here, I went quite green on his face, but that green is just going to be an undertone on his skin. So I glazed in a layer of that. And when you glaze it, when you mix it with the medium, it comes on very thin, and it allows everything that you've painted before to still show up underneath. And as you'll see as I go forward, I'll continue to add new colors onto his skin, and that green will be pushed further into the background. It'll still maintain that greenish glow to his skin, but it won't be such a bold color over time. But that kind of thing, you have to, since you're working in layers, you have to glaze in that one color and then let it dry, and then come back before you work in other colors. Otherwise they'll start smearing together. But with this piece being so complicated with all the details and all the moving parts involved in this painting, it was easy enough for me to work on one section, glaze in some color, and then move over to another section and work on that while I'm waiting for the paint in the other section to dry. And here I went back to the iron oxide red now, and I start glazing that in right over that green skin tone. And then while that iron oxide red is still wet, again, mixed with the medium, now I'm taking the titanium white and I'm just mixing it right in with that red. And it's giving me a real nice ghoulish skin tone for this character. And you'll see I've made little adjustments. I lowered his eyelid up top, and I'm going to continue to noodle around with that eyeball right up to the end of this painting. Yeah, sometimes you'll have these little sections of each painting where you just can't seem to get it the way you want it, and you just keep going back and forth to it. Usually, it's just these little tiny pieces in a painting that will bother me, and I just keep returning to them. But I just keep going back to it, and you work it, and you keep working until you are happy with the finished results. So you'll see throughout that eye up top is going to continue to change. The wardrobe that the character is wearing is going to continue to change, and so much will continue to evolve as this painting goes through. Now I'm starting to add some detail into the background. So I glazed in a cobalt blue into the background, and then again with the titanium white, just kind of adding a little bit of foggy weather to the scene, blending it right with that cobalt blue. Then I took some more blue and mixed it in with a little bit of black and started accenting those gravestones, drawing in a little pathway in the background, adding some trees, just little details. The background isn't the focus of this painting, so I didn't go too crazy with the details, but I wanted at a glance for you to understand what was happening in the background, even without seeing a lot of details. And that brings up an interesting point. When you're working on a painting, not every section of the painting has to be just as detailed as the rest of it. You can really control where you want your viewers' attention to go by the amount of detail you place in certain sections versus other sections where you choose to leave it a little less rendered or have less visual interest going on. For example, you'll see if you look off to the left of this painting, just the shoulder and the arm of that character, that's not a focal point at all. I didn't go overboard rendering the pattern on the fabric. In fact, as the painting goes on, I'll even glaze in some black over part of that fabric just to push it further into the background. It's not the focal point. There's not much of interest in that part of the painting. So again, in the interest of just trying to focus the viewer's attention on what matters, which is the story of this relationship between the character and the squirrel. That's where I chose to put most of the detail and effort into the piece, was just in the characters and in their interaction itself. And you'll see as I continue to go in and work on these Christmas lights, I'll take the colors from those bulbs and strategically place little hints of those colors over the cloth and the squirrel and the hands, and just pay attention to where I think those lights are going to reflect and cast that color around the painting. And that just helps the lights feel more like they're in that world, and it just adds a bit of interest to it. And this is the last stage on these lights here. I'm just bringing some of the darker color back in. If the bulb is all just a bright color, then you suddenly have nothing. You need that contrast of those darker colors in there with the light in order to sell that effect like that light is aglow. Once I go in and start adding more dark and shadow into the clothing, I will be sure to avoid those areas where the clothes are specifically lit up by those bulbs, therefore really enhancing that those bulbs are shining light onto the cloak. Whereas right now, before there's contrast in it, it may not be as evident. But these are little details that you want to pay attention to, and you just continue to improve your rendering as you go. And with each little bit of detail that you add, it just all stacks up, and it helps you make a nice cohesive story in your painting. And now we move into the adding the peanut in here, because after all, without the peanut, what is the squirrel's incentive to light that match? This, I think, is a little detail that really made this painting for me, was rather than doing a traditional eyeball with the black pupil and the specular highlights, I wanted the pupils to be this pale blue white, yeah, almost as if they're blind eyes, but not quite, more so like they are, more so like the character has this kind of interdimensional vision. His third eye is open and he's seen beyond this realm. And to me, I thought that was a fun little detail. It helped tie him into with the blue that's happening in the background. And yeah, I really just enjoyed that little detail just in the eyes. And you may have noticed that I signed this painting a while ago, but I continue to refine it. Usually, you know, you think of the signature as the last step. So when I sign it, that's usually the indication that I think the painting is done. But without fail, even after I sign a painting, I just continue to paint for hours, because you step back from your painting and you give yourself some distance and some time in between when you think it's finished. And you just start to notice all these things that bother you. Like I noticed the geometry on his face was a little off, so I had to reshape his cheekbone there. I had to again reshape the eyelid. Just doing all these little fine-tuned details. If you give it some time before you call it finished, and you just pay attention to the things that are bothering you about the painting, and you keep working through those things until you get to the point where it no longer bothers you. For me, at least, that's how I yield the best results. And here it is. It's all finished, and I'm pretty happy with the way this came out. It's called A Fair Exchange. And I also encourage you to follow me over on Patreon at patreon.com/Clint Carney if you'd like to keep up to date with what I've been doing. I hope to see you at a future live stream, again, every other Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you for watching. See you soon.